So our next three speakers are what we call our up-and-coming scientist version, our portion of the program, students and postdocs. Our first speaker of this group this morning is Michaela Teich. Michaela came to us from Switzerland and Germany in 2005 to do a postdoc with Mike Jenkins, and now doing forest snowpack interactions work with Jim Lutz and Sarah Null.
Thanks for the introduction. So today I would like to talk about the first part of my postdoc I did here at USU, where I looked at the question of bog beetle disturbances and how they may, oopsie, I do this here. Yeah. That's the thing of using a PDF. Huh? Yes. Okay. If bog beetle disturbances may alter forest protective effects against snow avalanches. And to give you a little background, we all know that bog beetle attacks associated with warming temperatures due to climate change have increased in mountain forests, and many bog beetle species are moving higher in elevation to forests where they haven't been previously observed. And this is a relatively new phenomena in Europe, and there it's especially concerning because many of these forests growing at the upper tree line protect people, settlements, and infrastructure against snow avalanches. And so since this is a relatively new development, we don't have any long-term data on how these changes to the forest and the forest structure may change the protective effect of these forests against avalanches. But what we do know, and this is what our approach is based on, is the anatomy of an avalanche, and that is that snow stratigraphy is key for avalanche formation. So a seasonal snowpack usually consists of different snow layers with varying properties such as hardness, grain size, and grain shape, which builds up over the season due to wind, new snow, sun, and snow metamorphism, which is driven by a temperature gradient in the snowpack and available water vapor. And for example, this snow metamorphism can build, for example, depth hoar layers on the ground where the snow crystals are not very well bonded, which can create a potential weak layer in the snowpack. And if such a weak layer breaks, an avalanche can start to move down the hill. So to form an avalanche, we do need a homogeneous snow stratigraphy, including potential weak layers. And this is true in vertical, but also in horizontal dimension, because such a homogeneous layering needs to be over a certain area. So in forests, the stratigraphy is usually much more heterogeneous compared to a homogeneous stratigraphy in in unforested terrain. And that is why healthy, dense forests can protect against avalanche releases. And this is due to several processes in the forest. So the falling snow gets intercepted by the creek grounds and then falls out more irregularly or dripping down into the snowpack when melting, disturbing the snowpack. Then the canopy shields the snowpack. The temperature fluctuations at the snow surface as well as in the snowpack are more moderate. Also, near-surface wind speeds are reduced, reducing wind redistribution as well as snowpack compaction. And finally, also remnant stumps and deadwood support the snowpack directly. But what's going to happen if a tree gets infested by bog beetle and starts to lose the needle, so we see changes in the canopy? How does this affect those processes? And will we maybe see a more homogeneous snow stratigraphy, which is prone to avalanche releases from those infested forests? And to study this stratigraphy in forests, I moved here to Utah because here we see those disturbances going on for several decades already. And so I have a study site in the Uinta Mountains here in Utah, where an ongoing spruce beetle attack has already killed many, many hectares of Engelmann spruce forests. And these forests are similar in structure to the protection forests in the European Alps. So studying these, the snow stratigraphy in those forests now here may help us to predict what may happen in the future in those forests in Europe. And so in our study sites, we have 4 study plots which are located in close proximity to each other. And they are representing different stages in a bark beetle outbreak cycle. So we have a green plot as an uninfested stand, a gray plot where the trees lost the majority of their needles already, a salvage logged stand where the infested trees got harvested and only small diameter trees are still standing, and a control plot in a in a nearby meadow. So what would we expect to see in terms of snow stratigraphy in those 4 treatments when we think about the canopy effects of the forest on the snowpack? We would think that the snow stratigraphy is getting more and more homogeneous from the green to gray harvested in the meadow plot, and that this has happened in both in vertical and horizontal dimension, and that we also will see changes over the season. So to test these hypotheses, we laid out transects in our 4 study plots. In winter 2015, the plots were 10 meters long, and we took snowpack measurements every 30 centimeters along those transects. And in 2016, the transects were 20 meters long, and we took measurements every 50 centimeter. And every time when we came back, which was every week or every other week during those 2 seasons, we moved the transects 50 centimeters through the forest and started the measurements again. On the bottom, you see an example of one of those transects laid out in our harvested plot. So to look into the snowpack without digging huge snow pits all over the place and disturbing the snowpack, we used an instrument called Snow Micropen, or short SMP, which is a digital penetrometer. So it is a probe, and at the tip of the probe there is a force sensor. And then the probe drives down with a constant speed into the snowpack and measures the force which is needed to break the bonds between the snow crystals every 4 micrometers. So this instrument gives us the opportunity to study the stratigraphy in a very high vertical resolution, but also in a high horizontal one, because it is minimally invasive, as you can see in this picture here. And this is how such a recorded signal, so the signals get, or the force gets recorded, and this is how those recorded forces looks like. These are examples for different snow types, and signals measured over 40 millimeters of snow, and exactly in these snow samples at the bottom, which are the 3D reconstructions of that snow. And we do see, of course, that in low density new snow, we have a small mean penetration force, a higher penetration force in a denser snow sample, and in those depth hoar crystals, it's a very distinct signal moving up and down. And if we plot those signals next to each other, so the signals we collected along our transect are here plotted next to each other, we can look onto the snowpack or into the snowpack like and see a 2D snow stratigraphy with the snow surface on the top and the ground on the bottom. And here, this is an example for one day measured in 2016 in February. But so in general, those profiles look the same for all the sampling dates. And here we see in red layers which are harder density, or a harder layer with a higher density, and then lower density layers in blue. And so we can see the different layers or how the snowpack looks like. And this is exactly what we have hypothesized here, just from looking, or hypothesized earlier, just from looking at those figures, that we see a more homogeneous layering in both dimensions in the harvest and the meadow plot compared to the green and gray plot, but also a lower snow depth in green and gray due to the interception of the snow. But how can we actually quantify this variability in stratigraphy we can already see here? And for this, we used a new method and to match and compare several profiles and calculated two similarity metrics. And the first metric compares every signal collected along our transects to every other signal which was collected on the same transect. So the signal at 10 meter is compared to the signal at 15 and at 10 and so on. And this shows the mean difference in penetration force between the two signals. That is, if they are very similar to each other, the pixel would be blue. If they are more different, the pixel would be red. So we see this the same as we have seen before. A more or a greater horizontal heterogeneity is present in the green and the gray plot compared to a more homogeneous horizontal stratigraphy in harvest and meadow plots. The second metric combines both the vertical and the horizontal heterogeneity by matching and comparing all the signals which were collected at one day at one transect. So it is kind of an index for the variability with higher values if this for more heterogeneous snowpacks. And here plotted is this index for the green, gray, the meadow, and the harvested plots, and for all our sampling dates in 2016. And we do see what we saw before, that the green has the highest heterogeneity, but also is pretty similar to the gray one on many days. And that harvest and meadow one are also pretty similar to each other. And we do not see a clear trend over the season. But so when going back to the protective effect of the forest on the snowpack, we saw that canopy is the biggest or has the biggest influence, or a very big influence on this stratigraphy below the canopy. And so here we plotted the canopy closure measured along our transects against this index for variability. And what we do see, of course, the harvest plot has the smallest canopy closure, or lowest canopy closure, while the green one has the highest one and the gray one is in between. And we also see what we would kind of expect, that the canopy closure is significantly correlated with the variability of snow stratigraphy. But this is independent if the canopy is green or gray, and this is a very important result. So again, also to stress this out, a more homogeneous or a more heterogeneous layering and greater variability says that these forests have a higher avalanche protective effect against releases. And this result brings me to my conclusion. And I have two take-home messages for you. And that is, newly dead trees can maintain avalanche protection, but locked forest sandstone. And this is very important, that we saw these gray stands in terms of snow stratigraphy are more similar to the green ones, so they are still very disturbed. And this is also, I want to tell you about my personal observations as well. When I went there like every week or every other week for 2 seasons, that the snow interception from those trees which already lost the needles is still very high. So it was really amazing to see how much snow still stuck in the tree crowns with those little twigs are still present. But the harvested one was very similar to the meadow one, which I also didn't expect, because there are still small trees standing around, so there's still a little shading going on. And also there were some dead wood laying on the ground, left over from harvesting. But these forests were infested about 5 years before we took our first measurements, so they still break down. And as when they get older and lose those little twigs and the canopy structure changes, this effect of those gray forest stands may also move a little closer to the harvested meadow one in terms of that a more homogeneous snow stratigraphy may build up. So what we do need is to continue to monitor the snow stratigraphy and the development of the snowpack in those forests as they get older. And we also need to look at it at greater spatial scales, regional scales, and move to actual avalanche terrain. So this was pretty flat, but how does it look on a slope and also in different aspects? And as well, it would be really great to catch winters with extreme snowfall where the interceptive or canopy interception may be reduced. So this could also then look a little different. So with that, I would like to thank my financial and material support, but also all the people who helped me in the field. This is, you need a lot of help doing this work and collecting this data. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions.